They're coming from 181 countries as of yesterday. Right, and we're a dumping ground. We're like a garbage can for the world. These are stone cold killers. They'll walk into your kitchen, they'll cut your throat. I don't know if you call them people. In some cases, they're not people, in my opinion, but I'm not allowed to say that because the radical left says that's a terrible thing to say. They're destroying the blood of our country. That's what they're doing. They're destroying our country. They don't like it when I said that. And I never read Mein Kampf. They said, oh, Hitler said that in a much different way.
Okay, for a start, immigrants aren't destroying the blood of our country. If anything, Mountain Dew Baja Blast is doing that. And let me be the first to say, I, for one, welcome the poison. But it is wild that Trump's response to being told he's quoting Hitler is, no, he said it differently. Especially because, not that differently. Hitler wrote, all great cultures of the past perished only because the original creative race died out from blood poisoning. So, same general idea, just a bit more coherent. I guess what I'm saying is, when it comes to rhetoric, Trump is no Hitler, but let him cook. But it is more than just talk about immigrants. Trump's also made a very specific promise.
As soon as I take the oath of office, we will begin the largest deportation operation in the history of our country, even larger than that of President Dwight D. Eisenhower many years ago. He was a big deportation person.
First, it is a hell of a thing to be citing Eisenhower, giving his programme, which deported hundreds of thousands of Mexican immigrants, is widely seen as both a fiasco and a stain on US history, while also having a name I'm literally unwilling to say on TV. It is one of many facts you may not have known about Eisenhower, along with he was the first president to ride in a helicopter and the first to pose for an official photo like he's on the cover of Women's Health magazine under the headline, How to Feel Fabulous at Any Age. Mass deportation is a cornerstone pledge for the Trump campaign. It was promoted on signs at the Republican convention and is referenced in the party's platform, and it seems to have widespread backing, given one survey found it has at least some support from 54% of Americans and 86% of Republicans. And Trump supporters will tell you they love the idea of mass deportation, even if they haven't thought much about the details.
Those people that are breaking the laws of this country that came across here illegal are going to be mass deported.
Mass deportations, that's what Trump's calling for.
Yes.
That's millions of people.
Well, the people that are here illegally. I don't have any problem with people coming here. My grandparents came here, but they did it the right way.
What, millions of people, though?
I don't care.
So
I think it has to happen, and I think citizens have to be behind it.
How do you think it's possible to do that humanely?
I don't know that, but I'm confident Trump can do it.
Are you? Look, there are things I'm confident Trump can and will do. Paraphrase Hitler, emotionally abuse his children, eventually die on the toilet. But unlike Aunt Bedazzle Hat here, I don't think figuring out how to humanely deport millions of people is one of them. The fact is, a lot of people seem to be supporting something right now whose implications they may not fully understand. So given that, tonight, let's talk about Trump's mass deportation plan. And before we go any further, we'll be talking a lot about the logistics of mass deportation. But for the record, the morality of it is despicable. Immigrants are human beings no matter what McDonald's worst employee says. With that said, let's start with the sheer size of what Trump is proposing, because the campaign claims there are 20 to 25 million illegal aliens in the country, despite experts saying it's roughly half that, with one group placing the number around 13 million people. So they're already off by the population of Ohio. But that still leaves the task of removing 13 million people, many of whom, incidentally, are spread throughout the country and have lived here for decades. Also, deporting someone isn't as simple as finding them, not liking their paperwork and putting them on a plane. It usually requires an arrest, detention, legal processing, and only then removal. And to carry out over 13 million arrests in a short period of time, it's been estimated the government will need to hire between 220 and 409,000 new government employees and law enforcement officers. As for the detention part, think for a second what it would entail to detain 13 million people. Bear in mind, the most recent data has the entire US prison and jail population at around 1.9 million. And we have a lot of prisons and jails in this country. They are kind of our thing. If we had a slogan, it should probably be America, home of jails and the KFC double down. And the Trump campaign will sometimes pretend they've taken this into consideration. Here's J.D. Vance gaming out a possible approach.
Now you've got 20 million, 25 million people. You have to figure out what to do with them. And I guess the way that I think about it, Bill, is, it's kind of like being asked, well, you have a sandwich and it's 10 times the size of your mouth. How do you actually eat the whole thing? And you take it one bite at a time, right? And I think you start with the million most violent, most criminal, illegal alien elements. There's probably, of the 20 million, there's probably 1 million who've committed some violent crime. That's an estimate, but I think it's pretty close to the truth. You deport them first and you focus on them first.
OK, first, I know this isn't the point, but I didn't know Bill O'Reilly still had a show. I had the vague, uninterrogated sense that he died when Roger Ailes did, either because I thought they were the same person or because that seemed like a plausible murder-suicide. I don't know. The subconscious is hard to pin down. But second, one bite at a time is an incredibly callous way to refer to mass deportation, even before you get to his casual 1 million of them are probably violent criminals, a statistic source to that's an estimate, but I think it's pretty close to the truth. And for the record, to deport just 1 million people a year would still cost an estimated $88 billion annually, with the majority of that going toward building detention camps. Over a decade, that'd cost nearly $1 trillion. And to be clear here, my biggest problem with we'd spend nearly $1 trillion on detention camps for immigrants is not the $1 trillion part. I don't want to see a headline tomorrow that says John Oliver blasts detention camps as too expensive. But I do think it's worth recognising the extent to which Trump and Vance are full of shit from a practical standpoint as well as a moral one. But just for the sake of argument, let's say mass deportation were a realistic policy. It still wouldn't solve the problems the Trump campaign's claiming it would. In fact, it would make them worse because they're constantly claiming deportations are the solution to unemployment, housing prices and crime. So let's take each of those in turn, starting with jobs. Historically, deportation has actually increased unemployment in this country. A study of the Obama years found that when 500,000 undocumented immigrant workers were forced out of the country, 44,000 fewer jobs were held by US-born workers, which may seem counterintuitive, but what often happened is companies that rely on immigrants for their customer base or their workforce end up shutting down. And as immigrants themselves will tell you, they might be the only ones willing to do certain work.
The thing is, if he wins, he kicks out all the immigrants. Those who work here in construction and everything, they're immigrants. You're not going to see a gringo filling his feet with cement, or carrying bricks, or carrying this or cleaning. You're not going to see it.
That's blunt, but it's true. There are certain jobs and whole industries reliant on immigrant labour. In our piece on farm workers, we showed you a viral video of a farmer explaining he couldn't hire enough people to harvest his fields, so the produce was rotting. Now, in that particular case, it was asparagus, so it was a minor tragedy at best. But the broader point here stands. And removing 13 million people who spend money in their communities would badly hurt the economy. In fact, experts have said mass deportation would lead to a loss of somewhere between 4 and 7% of annual GDP, which would be a crash on par with the Great Recession. And look, I'm not an economist, despite looking like I was left on the doorstep of an auditor's office as a baby. But my understanding is that the Great Recession was bad. So that's unemployment. What about housing? Because the Trump campaign is promising mass deportation will also fix our housing crisis.
This is simple supply and demand, my friends. We got to do two things to lower the price of housing. Two things to lower the price of housing for Nevadans is we've got to build more houses and we've got to deport the illegal aliens so that American homes go to American citizens.
OK, even if that wasn't total bullshit, J.D. Vance's very existence is proof that supply and demand doesn't always work. There was no demand for a business-pilled, bearded sycophant that gets routinely ignored by Trump. We already have 2 of those and we barely even use them, and yet here we are with an unnecessary third. The fact is, many economists think large-scale deportations could actually backfire and make the housing crisis worse, since, as you just saw pointed out, undocumented migrants are a key part of the construction industry, and nationally, mass deportation would remove 1.5 million workers from the construction workforce, including more than 1 in 3 roofers, ceiling tilers, stucco masons, plasterers and drywall installers. In fact, one professor who studies immigration says in the long run, immigrants are the solution to the housing crisis. Without immigrants, you can't increase the supply of housing. And for what it's worth, J.D. Vance, that is actually supply and demand in action. Not just some bullshit you dreamed up while between drafts of your next memoir, Dingus Sonata, where I'm guessing you'll solve poverty by comparing it to a turkey fucking Reuben. And finally, there is the claim mass deportation will reduce violent crime. As we've discussed before, for all the coverage isolated incidents get, research shows immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than US-born people. And FBI data shows violent crime has actually gone down since 2020. It's one of the genuinely good decreases since then, along with the amount of Zoom family dinners and the number of alive Henry Kissingers. One was still one too many. But despite that, Trump's continued making lurid accusations. There were his bullshit claims of pet eating in Springfield, Ohio, but he's also falsely claimed Aurora, Colorado is the victim of a Venezuelan gang takeover. It's an accusation that originated with this viral video of men with guns knocking on an apartment door. That clip frightened a lot of people, but to be clear, the Republican mayor of Aurora has flat out said a Venezuelan gang is not in control of those apartment complexes and the city has not been taken over or invaded or occupied by migrant gangs. But none of that stopped Trump from going to Aurora to push for mass deportation with the help of Stephen Miller, who even brought along some visual aids.
Look at all these photos around me. Are these the kids you grew up with? Are these the neighbors you were raised with? Are these the neighbors that you want in your city? No. These are the criminal migrants that Kamala Harris brought into your community. And as swiftly as they came, Donald Trump will send them back.
OK, for the record, if we're talking about someone you don't want as your neighbour, Stephen Miller would be top of my list. Imagine getting up in the morning, looking across your yard and seeing that fucking guy standing there looking like a minion's penis. Also, quick side note, if you're wondering what this thing is, it's a fair question. And that's a Trumpy bear. A stuffed bear with Trump's hair, attire and disturbingly human eyes. It looks like Paddington Bear if he had multiple hemorrhoids. It looks like a Care Bear that won't stop calling the other Care Bears gay. But don't let that bear distract you from the fact you just saw a crowd baited into booing pictures of Hispanic people who don't look like your neighbours. At that event, Trump announced plans for something he calls Operation Aurora. And his campaign has since described the city as a war zone. And that specific language points to what his real endgame here might look like. Because while, again, Trump can't deport 13 million or even 1 million people overnight, and mass deportation won't fix any of the problems he says it will, he could still use Aurora-style panics to give himself a ton of power. Here he is at that rally, gaming out a key piece of it.
I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Think of that. 1798. This was put there. 1798. That's a long time ago, right? To target and dismantle every migrant criminal network operating on American soil.
OK, 1798 is a long time ago. I reluctantly concede that point. But the act he's describing there is terrifying. It's a law that allows for summary deportation of people from countries with which the United States is at war, that have invaded the US, or that have engaged in predatory incursions. It was last used during World War II as the legal authority for interning immigrants of Japanese, German and Italian descent. And experts are concerned that a president like Trump could recognise a cartel as the de facto government of Mexican territory, then proclaim a migrant invasion perpetrated by the cartel government, and in doing so give himself a turbocharged deportation authority. That way he could quickly remove non-citizens, even green card holders, without any due process. And while there'd be legal challenges, the courts are now much more Trump-friendly than they were 8 years ago. And even if Trump doesn't choose to go that far, or does get stopped by the courts, it's worth remembering what he was able to do in his first term anyway. Because in addition to the endless circus of outrageous nonsense back then, like hosting a fast food banquet, or staring directly into the sun, or doing a loud honk honk in a big vroom vroom, he also aggressively ramped up immigration enforcement using large-scale worksite raids, which involved immigration agents storming workplaces. That's what happened in 2019 when ICE carried out massive raids on chicken processing plants across central Mississippi, arresting 680 workers in what may have been the largest ever workplace operation in any single state. And these weren't sweeps for violent criminals. They were attacks on working people whose only offence was being undocumented. More than 350 were deported, and many others are still awaiting court decisions. Many of the families broken up that day remain separated half a decade later. And the trauma of those raids on families and children was truly awful. And I will warn you, this is hard to watch.
A lot of students are crying because of their dad and mom missing. I don't want my dad. No, the Hispanic people are not doing nothing bad. They're not doing nothing. My dad bought everything for me to live over here, the rent, and I don't know what I'm going to eat. And I'm so hungry right now. I need my dad for me. My dad didn't do nothing. He's not a criminal.
Yeah, we did that. And we're apparently a coin flip away from going even further. And a lot of Trump supporters seem to be in denial about exactly what a plan of mass deportation would entail. And that's a frustrating pattern here. In Trump's first term, this local business owner in Indiana was deported, to the apparent shock of the people in his community.
They're all strong supporters of Roberto Beristain, though 4 out of 6 of them voted for President Trump.
I voted for him because he said he was going to get rid of the bad hombres. Roberto is a good hombre.
Well, a couple of things about that. First, if showing up with a shirt on your back and working hard for 20 years makes someone a good hombre, I've got some news for you about a whole lot of fucking immigrants. But also, how do those people even begin to apologise for a situation like that. I don't think Hallmark sells cards that say, sorry, we inadvertently got you deported because we assumed Trump would only be racist against Hispanics we didn't know personally. And I really want to hope people are waving around signs without understanding what mass deportation actually means in practice. But make no mistake, the people campaigning on it absolutely do, and it's horrendous. So what can we do here? Well, there's the obvious, and that is vote, but it's also we're talking to people in your life who are concerned about immigration, about what they really want to happen here, because our system definitely does need fixing. But there are much more humane ways to do that, and even some Republicans seem open to that idea, because, well, as I mentioned earlier, the slogan mass deportation polls depressingly well. A recent study showed that when people were actually given a specific choice between mass deportation and pathways to citizenship as an immigration policy, specifically outlining how each might work, majorities in every swing state preferred the path to citizenship. In fact, even among Republicans in 5 of 6 swing states, it was preferred, which suggests that when people genuinely understand what these policies look like, they tend to choose the less punitive one. And I do believe the vast majority want to do what is right for the immigrants they know. The task is to extend that same humanity to the immigrants they don't. And that is a task both parties would do well to adopt, because Democrats have not been stellar on this issue either. Obama holds the record for most deportations in a single year, and Biden's immigration policies, as we've discussed multiple times before, have been haphazard at best. So I would hope a potential Harris administration would do much better than the one she's been part of for the last 4 years and begin a much-needed overhaul of a system badly in need of repair. But to be very clear here, immigrants are not the ones that broke this system. On the contrary, they're making the most of the splintered shards we've given them and continuing to build lives, communities and this country into something better, richer and stronger. And the very least we can do for them is to go out on November the 5th and not pick a president who demonises their existence, advocates for their suffering and has proven multiple times that he is, to put it mildly, a bad fucking hombre.